Poker is a game played by men, but absolutely made for women. Actually, the reality was that I was exhausted. I'd passed out on the trading floor 3 times. We are the default parent oftentimes because we're perfectionists and we're high achievers and we care deeply about our family. And I think as women and as business people, we have to do that all the time.
Welcome to today's episode of I'm Fine But. I am joined by Jo Living. Jo, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So Jo, please can you tell our listeners who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name's Jo Living. I'm the founder of Aces High, and Aces High delivers team building corporate workshops using poker to help tease out essential business skills, actually around negotiation, communication, how you can manage risk and reward and perform in high stakes moments.
What an exciting business to have. That's amazing. So Jo, take me back to the beginning. Where did all this start?
Well, I guess it started back in 2016, and I was actually on holiday in Morocco at the time, and sun-drenched beaches, good book, tagine was all I wanted. And I was pregnant at the time, actually, and so just after a relaxing holiday. But my boyfriend at the time had clocked an international poker tournament in 2 days' time and wasn't letting up. I'd actually only been learning poker as a hobby for about 6 months, so pretty much a novice. Reluctantly rolled off my hammock and back on the bus to Agadir and took my book along because I was fully expecting an early exit. And life deals you a hand sometimes you never see coming, because 8 hours later at 4 a.m, just as the sun was coming up, I had beaten 200 men to win my first international poker tournament.
Amazing.
And that's where I got the bug. Yeah.
Wow. So an international tournament, the first one you've ever done, and you won it.
Yes, that's right. The first tournament I'd won, and I'd been practicing a bit and learning some of the skills. But I always say, poker is a game played by men, but absolutely made for women. It's less about the bluff and bravado and boys' night that people think and associate with it. It's much more about deep listening and emotional empathy and knowing your value and timing your contribution. And so what I saw was, time and again, players were raising and playing aggressively to me. And I realized if I could pick my moments and time my moves, I could use their aggression to my advantage to take their chips. And ultimately, poker taught me judo in a sense, because it was how to use your opponent's force against them.
Wow, that is amazing. And what did you do before this, Jo?
So I started my career with 10 years in investment banking, actually. I actually also grew up around cards. So both my parents were bridge teachers. My dad in particular was a playing card expert and enthusiast and collector. Actually, so much so that when Derren Brown was seeking out someone to perform a televised card trick on, he didn't just want the man on the street, he wanted the UK's leading playing card expert, and sought out my dad. So somewhere on YouTube is Derren Brown doing card tricks on my dad. So I grew up around cards. I was shuffling age 6, doing card tricks on aunties and uncles aged 8. But inevitably, I left cards behind. I traded bridge for Bloomberg and entered the high stakes world of investment banking. And that's where I kind of cut my teeth in business. It taught me a lot. I actually, ticked a lot of boxes early on in my career in terms of had some level of success and, had a flat and a boyfriend and a good job. But actually the reality was that I was exhausted. I'd passed out on the trading floor 3 times. And, eventually after a bit of soul searching, realized I was done with making rich people richer, and quit with not really a lot planned, which was quite a high risk move. But then I started sort of the second phase of my career, which I would say has been more in entrepreneurship. Immediately before Aces High, had founded a tech company, which was an app around offering support to women going through IVF. We were able to raise venture capital funding for that. Only 2% of VC funding goes to female founders, so we knew the odds were stacked against us. But happily, poker had taught me a thing or two about handling myself in high stakes negotiations in a room full of men, and I was able to secure investment and scale that business, developing a world-class product, a brilliant team, and eventually selling that to a pharmaceutical.
Oh, so you were in Morocco and you'd won this tournament and you were pregnant as well. How far along with your pregnancy were you?
It was pretty early, but I was also grieving the death of my brother actually at the time. He had been diagnosed with cancer in the January and passed away in the December, so it was quite a late stage diagnosis. And then I was on holiday in Morocco that following summer, newly pregnant, but also grieving. And so potentially that gave me like a steeliness and resilience, and, you know, a kind of, yeah, maybe an attitude of wanting to take risks and prove something. I grew up with two older brothers in Essex, so I always had this kind of concept of smashing the stereotypes and keeping up with the boys and joining in a man's world. And that served me through my investment banking days, through tech startups, through the poker circuit. And that was my first sort of taste of that. And I absolutely fell in love with the game because it's not about bluff and bravado. It's about strategy and statistics and discipline and patience.
So you'd won this tournament. You've got this almost sense of, I can imagine, like life's too short. Like if we want to do something, we need to do it now. And when you came back, what was the moment when you thought, "Do you know what, there's something in this? Did it start out as being a business idea, or did you say, I'm going to do more tournaments?
Great question. So absolutely, I was in that phase of life where I had no fucks left to give. I had quit banking. I'd actually, lost my brother fairly recently, at that time, and it was like that need to be authentic. And who am I people pleasing? And what am I showing up for? And I think I always had an entrepreneurial itch to scratch. I'd always been the kid with the lemonade stand, the student with the side hustle, and now had this other kind of bigger plans. With the poker though, it was started off only as a hobby. So what happened was, wanting to kind of dive into poker a bit more, I entered, played a bit more, had some success, but I, more than anything, started hosting my own home games, which were just small stakes, low buy-ins, but got a bit kind of despondent with how male dominated they were. Despite all my best efforts, it was sort of local dads from the school and neighbours, but I couldn't get women to show up. And there's really no reason, it's just a card game. So I started hosting beginner women's nights just for fun, to get people really build the funnel into my home games for diversity. And that's when I really saw something very interesting. These women were quickly growing in confidence to the point where they were like closing more client deals, landing promotions, even like asserting better boundaries in their home lives too. And my friend Caroline, after a particularly successful client negotiation, had said, I realized I had aces. There was no way I was folding. And it wasn't an isolated anecdote. It was sort of these time and again, women were saying, I'm folding on doing the dishwasher, and asserting their boundaries, knowing their value. And that really was the seed where I'd seen it in my own career, raising venture capital investment, negotiating the sale of my company, but I hadn't quite joined the dots until I saw these other women reporting the same thing, that they were leaning into male dominated spaces, asserting their value and negotiating better. And that's how Aces High was born, when I saw the link between the skills inherent in poker, that you actually don't need to gamble to actually, take those for yourself in terms of personal and professional development. And I started playing around with the concept of what would it look like to create a zero gambling, completely beginner friendly, inclusive for women experience, and bring that to the corporate world as a learning and development experience. And that's, I think, where Isis High was born.
Wow. And I love that so much, because you do think like poker in my head, I straight away imagine like a circular table with men having cigars and hats on, and it's a bit smoky and mafia style. That's the vision that I get definitely in my head when I think about poker. Whereas actually there is no reason at all why there should not be more women that are out there, because it is just a card game, same as any other card game.
It's a really fun game of strategy. But you're exactly right. Time and again, we've got this kind of imagery in popular culture around gangsters with cigars in smoky basements, playing a game of bluff and bravado. And if you look at it in the movies, you can probably think of a few big poker scenes like Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, Ocean's 11, Only Fools and Horses. In every single one of them, that's exactly the setting, and they're playing a game of bluff called Five Card Draw. So there's a reason why it has a reputation as a game of bluff, because Five Card Draw is, I have 5 cards, you have 5 cards, and it's almost entirely a game of bluff and brag and betting to ascertain basically who's got the bigger bollocks. And when we look at Texas Hold'em, it's a game with only 2 private cards, with up to 5 face-up community cards in the center, which are shared. So it's much more of the information about the hand is shared, which shifts it automatically from a game of bluff to a game of strategy. And Texas Hold'em came around in the 60s and then went on to evolve. And so the variety, by the time you look at Casino Royale, they are playing Texas Hold'em. So the evolution of the game has changed, but maybe the reputation and the kind of settings and stereotypes hasn't caught up. And the big analogy is, why should women not be able to take a seat at the poker table because of stereotypes and it historically being male dominated? And how can we carry this forward to the boardroom table, where women also aren't necessarily pulling up seats or being invited into the card room, the boardroom table? And so I think there's a really interesting reflective point there around who deems himself worthy of putting up a seat at the table, and how can you lean in to moments or settings that have historically been male dominated or not for you.
Yeah, because I am fascinated with the evolution of women and the roles that have changed over the last 100 years. I can delve into that, and especially different industries as well, how much some of them have changed, but some of them haven't really at all. And from my experience as being a business owner, not so much now, because I think I can hold my own a lot better than I used to do. But when I first got into business, I remember going to events and there'd be a lot of men that were older than me. I was mid-20s and they would have their suits on. It would be like a business brunch, which I didn't really know what that was. And you would get talked down to quite a lot. And actually just having that confidence and that knowledge in yourself and in what you can do to be able to stand up and go, do you know what? I don't need you to speak to me like that. Actually, I'm very knowledgeable on what my topic is. And I think that is a skill that you do have to learn, depending on, your background or the environment that you're in.
Absolutely. Sort of that concept of knowing your value, right? And also recognizing you don't need to be in every hand. Like, poker players only pay 20% of their hands, and the rest, when they're not dealt good starting hands, they might just be folding before any betting's happened. And that's okay, so that when you do lean into those moments, you're sure of yourself, because that's the topic area, and so that's going to help you build confidence. It's going to help you kind of share your value, time your contribution, and really see it less as a risk of leaning in and more as an opportunity, because you're looking, and poker, we talk about expected returns and balancing that trade-off of risk and reward. And I think as women and as business people, we have to do that all the time. What's the opportunity cost of being in this hand versus that hand? What's the payoff of doing this, even if it feels risky? And we speak a lot about reevaluating risk and reframing it. We're not saying you should be raising aggressively and bluffing every single hand in every single conversation, but equally you shouldn't be folding every hand before you've got to be in the arena. So it's about weighing up your own strengths, the situation, but trying to do that more statistically, more kind of less emotionally about your own fears, but really understanding objectively where your strengths are and which hands you're going to be in, and how then you're going to build the pot, raise your chips and own the moment. And that's the challenge.
Yeah, there's so much correlation between business and poker.
We really do come up against those stereotypes, and we're trying to sell Aces High into corporates and people say, oh, but it's not for women, so we can't do it, or there's gambling, so that's against our rules. And actually it's a zero gambling, designed for beginners, utterly inclusive for women experience. And typically our beginner women that come in thinking they're probably going to hate it are the ones that learn the most and typically come out with the trophy at the end. Yeah. And it's very interesting how people think it's not for them, it's not for business, it's not not for women, and none of it's true.
I don't know about you, but when somebody says to me, or I hear the phrase, it's not for women, that just makes me want to do it more.
Definitely. I grew up with two older brothers. I definitely have that kind of needing to kind of join in and keep up and even, win in a man's world. And the more we can make it just not a man's world, the more everyone gets a seat at the table. Everyone benefits.
So you then had your son, you've built this amazing business. How have you found that balancing being a mother and building this business up alongside it?
This business is rather new. It's only about 18 months old. But the business before that, my tech business, was very much when my son was younger, raising investment, high growth tech startup alongside a younger child. So that's the kind of more relevant part of my startup journey in terms of motherhood. I have to call out my husband. Like, he is so beyond equal. It's not, it's not even 50-50. It's probably 60-40 in terms of the weight that he lifts as being a parent. And it's not me kind of leaving meal plans. He's just equal parent, owning all of the mental load alongside me. And I think when I look at kind of friends that don't have that, or it's less equal, I do see the resentment creeping in, and I think it's phenomenally hard when, we talked about the evolution of the role of women. What I'm seeing is that we've had children later. So as did a little bit our parents. So we have aging parents at the time we have young kids, at the moment when we're reaching seniority in our careers, and perhaps, we're hitting perimenopause just as our kids are turning to teenagers. And so it almost seems this perfect storm of mental load, meets busyness. And, I think we ask the question so often, how do you hack being a mum and a businesswoman and this and that? And I think the question is, how do you find things to say no to, and how do we divide? Because it's just too much. And rather than almost victim blaming, you're not efficient enough, or you need to succeed in this way, we need to have the conversation about, like, when is it too much? And I saw this recently with my friend who's been promoted in her career. Her husband's lost his job. He's not actually doing as much as the stay-at-home dad stuff as you would think, given he's out of work. And she's just carrying it all. And she was kind of breaking down at work, and they said, we'll get you a coach. And she was sort of quite pleased with that. And I said, you do realise that's putting the onus on you to either improve efficacy or efficiency or somehow your performance. And I think that's the wrong question. I think your question should be with, the roles with your husband, the seniority that you didn't actually want because the person above you quit at work, and you've been, promoted to more seniority, without the pay or the title, and actually turn the question around and being like, what can we do really well? Because what ends up happening, as we see time and again, is you feel like half a wife, half an employee, half a mother, and you're doing everything imperfectly. And no wonder we end up feeling a bit shit about ourselves.
You've got so much in life that's happening. It's busy, isn't it? It's a busy time. So it is having that strategy of going, okay, how do I manage this? And how can I utilize things like your relationship, your marriage, to make sure that you are well supported? Because the mental load for a lot of women is huge. And, I'm the same as you, Jo, that my husband is great, but I do speak to hundreds of women every single year. And one of the main things is the mental load, because they are taking everything and they are ultimately being the default parent. And that takes a lot of strain on women. And as women as well, we do take that role on ourselves sometimes because we want to please everybody.
I was about to say that exact point. Like, we are the default parent oftentimes because we're perfectionists and we're high achievers, and we care deeply about our family and our jobs, and you don't want to let people down, and we've been, raised to be good girls, etc. And so, you sort of said, how can I manage this? And again, it's more like, what can I say no to? What can I let drop? Like, would it be the end of the world if World Book Day, they didn't have the perfect character, and I didn't actually home bake those cookies for the bake sale, and I'm going to leave work at 4 p.m. and block out my diary. Like, so yeah, that asserting boundaries is really hard, and it's difficult to put that back onto the women again. Like, how do you call on your husband? What do you say no to? But I think that is sort of being a bit of a slummy mummy sometimes, and like, okay, they're just, they're going to have chicken nuggets for dinner tonight. That's okay. No one's
What
died.
did you call it? A slummy mummy?
Slummy mummy, yeah. As I take a little bit of pride in that, sort of, which is kind of an oxymoron, but just sort of saying like, perfection is the enemy of completion. This is good enough. I know my son is loved, cared for, supported. I give him time, energy, and of course he's got, everything he needs. The bits around the edges, like 10 minutes more of TV, chicken nuggets instead of home cooked meal, not every night, but when things are at breaking point or you need to build some flex into the system, that is not going to move the needle on your child's outcome. Ultimately they are the big picture stuff. They're loved, cared for, and safe. And just kind of take the pressure off your own shoulders on some of those bits around the edges.
Yeah, and it's quite empowering as well in a lot of the sense. And one of my best friends, she does laugh at me because we've got a school WhatsApp group, which I am terrible at WhatsApp groups. And, it's the usual like mum's bottomless brunch Saturday afternoon that they're all organising. And she will say yes. And then she'll message me and go, you best say yes, because I've said yes. And I'll just put a message in and go, oh, I can't make it. And she's like, well, why can't you make it? You need to put an excuse in. And I'm like, I don't need an excuse. I don't want to go. Like, my priorities are not this. Like, if I want to go out, like the mums at school are lovely women, but they're not my friendship group. If I'm going to spend time with people, I want to spend it with my friend, who my actual friend is in that group, but I'll spend it with her personally. And just having that boundary to say no to things that, not feeling like you have to say yes because everybody else is saying yes, and getting rid of FOMO as well. Like, I think that's a big part of your life to go, actually, do I really want to do this? Like, is it something that is needed to be done? If it's not, then I can remove it. And I think with you talking about poker as well, I love card games, but I've never played poker. And I think a lot of the skills that you've said there really relate to just being a woman as well, and just taking ownership of the decisions that you make in everyday life.
Yeah. That opportunity cost is really what it comes down to. If there is something that serves you that feels a bit indulgent, like on the Saturday afternoon, I need to, go to the gym or have some time with my friends. That's not, being a mummy. I think kind of releasing the mum guilt around that. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You have to be able to have a sustainable home life and balance with your, business commitments. It's a real juggle. And I think, constant decisions and changing needs and, having to react in the moment. Like if your kid comes home from school in tears and you've got a 4:00 meeting, something has to switch, right? So where are you able to pivot? And again, back to the poker theme, you're constantly evaluating and re-evaluating your hand in the context of the new information that comes out with the additional cards. And that can change the next round of betting. So I think having that fluidity and be like, yes, I did commit to this, but unapologetically, I now have to prioritize that. That's where the stress comes in. I think where there's that reality gap where you think, I want to be this businesswoman or, parent or partner. And the reality is I'm only doing it at this.
And it's expectations as women that we put on ourselves as well. And that is a lot about where mum guilt comes from, and the expectations that we place on ourselves from being a good mum, from being a business owner, for being a wife, for being somebody who is, if you feel like you're expected to keep the house clean or do the washing, it's all expectations that we are placing on ourselves, whether that's necessarily or not necessarily. That's up to the individual to decide. So, Jo, tell me, if there is somebody listening who is thinking, that sounds amazing, I'd love to do a little bit of poker, or I'd love to set up a business around cards or some sort of hobby, what one bit of advice could you give them that you've learned that's just a golden nugget of, this would have really helped me at the start?
If the question's around setting up a business, I think kind of the key nugget is around doing something that moves it forward, however micro that is. So when ACES High started, I didn't suddenly think I'm going to go and deliver to global corporates and tech giants. I thought this will be me with a pack of cards, some chips, chancing it after work, trying to do some team building fun. And I think asking yourself, what's the minimum viable product? What's this next right thing? What's the smallest step I can do that's going to build my confidence, give me traction, give me data to evidence, whatever your startup idea might be, but actually build momentum. So don't wait till it's all fully formed. Perfection is the enemy of completion. You've got to start with something, even if you don't feel ready, and then get it out there in front of your target audience. And that's the key for any startup: is test early, build in public, get that early feedback, be willing to pivot once you get some real clients to kind of give you feedback. But it's going to build your confidence as you get there's early wins. And it doesn't need to be, a fully fledged product. It can be the smallest version of that. And actually, even before it was me with my tips and my cards, I was teaching those women poker, and it came from there. So I think follow your passion as well. For me, it's cards, right? And I found my ikigai. I don't know if you've come across this Japanese concept where there's 4 Venn diagram circles. And where they meet in the middle is your ikigai. And the questions for each of the 4 circles is, what do you love? What are you good at? What do people need? And what will people pay for? And for startups, for me, I love poker and cards. I'm good at facilitation and workshops. People need communication and negotiation skills, and people will pay for corporate offsites. So for me, Aces High sits at the kind of center of all of those things. And I think once you find something that you're truly passionate about, typically you're also good at it, and then you can inspire and engage others because they'll want to kind of be around someone that's passionate.
Yeah, that's such lovely like visualizations as well, to really draw that out and have it stuck on your wall, just because there is times that it gets hard in business when you're tired, and you almost feel like you are, you're trying to get the wheels turning, you're trying to get it going, and you've got to be really resilient in that. So having that real fresh idea, something visual as well, that you can see those 4 circles, I can imagine them now, is a really good tool to have. And what about things that have been hard for you, Jo? Has there been any points where you've struggled with this journey, or you've thought it's a lot? Is there anything that you can share with our listeners?
I think it is a roller coaster. Any founder journey is going to have, I think, higher highs and lower lows than your typical corporate job, just because it can be lonely, and you're not typically putting yourself out there without necessarily a regular paycheck, so it feels a little bit more vulnerable. It's also, as I said, personal to you, and so every no and every rejection feels like it stings a little bit more. But I think what's helped me is seeing every no as a data point. So it's information. Why did that not appeal to that client? Was it the price point? Was it that they think it's gambling? Was it that they think it's not for women? Was it something different? Was it a competitor? And so, getting really comfy with rejection. I think it's not plain sailing. And I think once you build in rejection and kind of failure as part of the journey, like if you're not failing and getting rejection at some point in your startup journey, you're probably too much in your comfort zone, or not trying new things, or not really building anything new. And so, or you've got a great business and well done, but typically there's some element of rejection or failure in there. So just recalibrating your relationship with that and build it into your expectations as that's completely normal. I have to make 100 outreaches, 80 will ignore me, 10 will reject me, and then there's 10 left that might be future clients or whatever the odds are. But see it as a poker hand. Every poker hand that you fold, you get a fresh set of cards and you get to go again. And I think that's the joy of entrepreneurship. It's like in the challenge, it's a game. And then, losing some loved ones early, as well as my brother. I lost my mum, my dad, my best friend in fairly short succession. And that really did give me an energy of, I'm going to do what is authentic to me, what I love, and, turn up in a way that brings me joy and see what happens. And it's a game of life, and poker is a game, just like, and life really, and startup and entrepreneurship is a game.
Yeah, and that's so inspiring, Jo. Like, I think everything that you've said will really resonate with any female founder, anyone that's, thinking of starting a business. There are so many lessons to be learned in everything, and there isn't really any failure point. There's just a learning point from it, and to see it as that, and to have a mindset of, I've 100% got to fail at things in order to learn from them, in order to push yourself. And you are so right that if you're not hitting those things, it usually is because you are not pushing yourself that extra little bit further, and it wants to feel a little bit scary but a little bit exciting at the same time, to get you to that next thing, if that is what you're wanting to do. And it's all about, doing what you do now. You're going to keep getting that, and that's something that goes on in my head all the time. But if I want something different, I've got to change it up. I've got to push myself. I've got to step out my comfort zone. And it's such an inspiring story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. I would love you to let our listeners know where they can find you, Jo.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Yes, aceshighLondon.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. My name is Jo Living. So yeah, if you Google Jo Living and Aces High, there's been enough features now that you'll find us. And if you can think of one person in the corporate world that might want to help their team raise their game, please do mention Aces High. As a small and new business, word of mouth is absolutely everything. So yeah, thanks for having me and your support.
Thank you so much, Jo, for joining us today. You've just listened to I'm Fine But. If you're unsure about business or what really matters to you right now, why not take our free core values course? It's linked in the show notes and it's a brilliant place to begin. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and you can follow us online at all your favourite social media platforms at Baby Beats UK. Until next time, I'm Rose and I'm fine. But honestly, we're all just figuring it out.